Overwatch competitive feels awful right now. So just a little bit about me. I'm a diamond support player. I've played Overwatch for 8 years now, if it released back in 2016. And in my opinion, the game has never felt worse than it does right now. So in this video, I sort of want to go through the 5 main reasons I think that Overwatch feels awful right now, especially the competitive side of things. I'm less going to touch on quick play because I don't really play quick play. When I go on Overwatch, I play the competitive mode. That's just always how it's been. There are probably issues with quick play just due to the meta and things like that at the moment, but I mainly want to touch on the competitive side of things and why I think where I am in the rank right now, it feels really bad. So first I'd like to touch on the matchmaking. I think we can all agree that matchmaking feels very unfair at the moment. Very much a stomp or be stomped mentality. I never feel like we are getting games where it feels equal from either side and there's a proper fight to win. It always feels like there is a really good tank or a really good DPS on the other team that is just destroying the lobby and shouldn't be in the rank that they are, especially with the current rank system, which I will definitely get onto later because I think there are many issues with it. Getting onto the wide matches system, I really dislike this system. I have made it so clear that I do not like this system at all. I feel like it's a very bad excuse for matchmaking rather than a fair feature. I understand why they've done it. It's very good for people who play in groups, and let's say one friend is just outside the range, or they want to play with their silver friend but they're in masters, that kind of thing. I get why they've done it, but I think the execution of it is incredibly poor. Because I could go into a game, let's say my friend is gold 3 and I am plat 2. I will go into a game and it will be a wide match, and before I've done that and ended up in games which range from gold to masters, which I don't think is right for a gold 4 to be playing in masters whether it's wide match or not. It's not fair for me to be playing in masters as a plat player either. It doesn't really work out either way. So I just think it has many issues. One of the ways they could revamp it is so that the wide match system is a bit more precise. And I know they've said that, and I know that would make queue times very, very long. But there's enough players to the point where you can make a more precise matchmaking system. So overall, I think just the matchmaking does need a bit of a rework and a bit of a revamp. The next issue I want to brush on is the balancing changes. Every game has a meta, but I feel like since the release of Overwatch 2, every meta they've introduced has been quite poor and quite awful, and every meta that they've caused by every change hasn't felt great. It's always okay for every game to have characters more powerful than others, because otherwise a game wouldn't work and it would be incredibly boring, and it would just be like fights that go on forever. But it's not okay to have incredibly frustrating characters to play against that just feel unfair. For example, the recent rise of Malga. He was very frustrating to play against. It didn't feel fair at all to go against a Malga in any role. It didn't even feel fair to go toe-to-toe as a tank, because any tank that has a slightly larger hitbox would just instantly crumble the second they go against a Malga. It's okay that you have to swap to counter a tank, but it doesn't feel fun when the whole game you feel like you're just playing rock, paper, scissors with the other tank. It doesn't create a healthy game, and I think it has a big problem. But this leads me on to sort of a subsection I want to touch on, which is the role system and how it's causing a lot of issues for the game right now. My personal issue with the role system is that 2 out of the 3 roles feel like they matter less now. DPS has very low impact at the moment, despite the recent changes to decrease healing output. I think that's a really good change to make it matter more. Support really depends on which ones you play, because only I'd say 2 or 3 of the supports right now are viable in a ranked game. The tank role right now feels absolutely awful to play, as it feels like you either make or break the game completely. Overwatch is a team-based game at its core, but it feels like the whole team relies on this one role to do everything, and if your tank doesn't perform well, there's absolutely no recovering, making the DPS and support feel sort of useless in a way, which doesn't feel good, especially me being a support main. It just makes me feel like my role in the game doesn't really matter, and it all relies on this random tank I've got in my game that I don't communicate with, because no one even turns on voice chat in Diamond anyway, which is fair enough. The game is very toxic, which is another section I will talk about later. But I think the issue still stems from, and I'm going to sound like one of those 6v6 people that go mental over it, but I think the change to one tank caused this issue because so much lies now on the person playing the tank role. For example, in Overwatch 1, if one of your tanks wasn't performing well, it doesn't matter. You've got another tank who's probably got some kind of damage mitigation who can really help the team. In Overwatch 2, this tank has to either do it or they don't do it. It's really not fun to play with, especially if your tank is bad. Games now just solely feel like they rely on how well your tank is doing, rather than how well the team is doing, which is not good for a team-based game, and it doesn't feel great to play with if you're not the tank. But now jumping on to another section, I really need to talk about this new ranking system. The current ranking system, I think, is a brilliant concept. I really think it's a great idea, but with how the matchmaking is at the moment, it really doesn't work. Stomp or be stomped basically makes it so your progress doesn't feel earned, or it feels impossible to maintain. You could go on like a winning streak for so long, but then you get loads of matches where you are just completely stomped and it's not anyone's fault, it's just the matchmaking, and you completely lose all of your points that you've earned, and it doesn't feel great to do that, because it doesn't feel like it's your fault when you are in a game with people that are 2 whole tiers higher than you. It's still not very clear either how each points modifier works, like the calibration, the expected loss, expected win. They haven't been very transparent. They obviously show that it either gives you points or loses you points, but they don't show sort of exactly what it does. And I think that's quite a big issue, because the whole idea was with this new rank system was they were going to be transparent with the community about how it works, what they're looking for, what each modifier does. They were going to be very transparent. I think they are more transparent than the previous system. However, they are still not showing us exactly what it is. They've only really given us a little bit of insight, which I think is fair enough. You can't give away everything about the way your game is designed, but we were promised transparency, and all we've got is some modifiers which we don't know exactly what they do, other than gain/lose us RP. They could fix this rank system. I think it has a really good core and a really good concept, genuinely. I really like it. I almost long for the old rank system where you'd play 5 games, because I feel like you were more in control there. It based it more off of how you performed in games. If you were performing well in games, you wouldn't go down a rank. If you weren't performing well in games, you could potentially go down in ranks depending on how you played in those games you win. I like that system. I think they could potentially bring it back if this system starts to fail again, but they just need to be more transparent throughout the whole thing. They need to give a predicted rank each time. They need to... There's a fly just landed on my mic, genuinely. I think if they made it so the old rank system with the 5 games was based more around your individual performance, I genuinely think it could be an amazing system that makes the fandom less toxic, because you feel less like your personal rank relies on how your teammates perform, and I really like that idea. Overwatch is a team-based game, but it's also judged on individual performance, and I think that's a bit better for the health of the game, because then it feels like it's your performance that really matters, and not what your teammates are doing. If you've got a throwing tank, it's fine. As long as you are trying to perform your job to the best of your ability, it's fine. I think that would be a decent system. I just think they need to be brave enough to test it and do it. The next and final thing I want to talk about is something that is not the developer's fault. However, it still has to be talked about because it is a big issue in the competitive scene. I would just like to clarify, once again, this is not the fault of the game developers. This is the fault of the Overwatch community, and it is Toxicity. The game is very toxic. Like, this is a known thing. People always make jokes about, oh, Overwatch players win, oh, gold, plat, diamond players. Because that is the, like, toxic section, I would say, of Overwatch, is gold, plat, diamond. It's where people are stuck and they can't rank up, so they blame anything but themselves. Since the start of the game, all of Overwatch 1, I was a gold player. Overwatch 2 came around, I've sort of climbed plat, diamond, and I've peaked at diamond 1. You get so many people leaving, so many people swearing, saying like offensive stuff in the voice channels, in the text chat, and Overwatch cracks down on it. They are very good at, like, if you report something, it is very quick to get banned and they tell you if it's been banned. Playing competitive is never going to be a fun experience if it is that toxic, and there's nothing they can do about that. But I think if we slowly start to roll in different changes that I have mentioned throughout this video, it might get a bit less toxic, especially with the rank system change. If it's more focused on your performance, even though it is a team-based game, I think it will get less toxic because people will be more focusing on what they are doing rather than what the team are doing. So overall, competitive Overwatch at the moment doesn't feel great for the reasons I've outlined. The matchmaking feels quite bad. The ranking system is not at its finest. It's okay, but it's not at its finest. The balancing is all over the place. The roles system needs a massive revamp, and that goes for quick play as well. And the toxicity is at its highest it has ever been in the 8 years I have played Overwatch. How can they change this? I think a new ranking system needs to come in place. I know they've just changed this one, but revolves around individual performance rather than how you perform with random people on the internet you have never met before. With the balancing changes, I think that they need to bring back the experimental card so that they can try these changes with players and see how they react to it and see how it performs statistically, and then think about rolling it out into the quick play and competitive and arcade and all that. Finally, the matchmaking, I think they just need to tighten it up a little bit. Overwatch still has enough players to the point where you can tighten up the matchmaking system, so I think they should look at doing that, but queue times could be bad. So I am not a developer, I've never developed a game, unless you count Scratch, but I am not a developer. I cannot say if that would work and how queue times would be. But other than that, I think that's all my grievances with the current system and how I would personally change it.